do men want?
Manifests itself in relationships, and you feel it in relationships, and they can be very powerful spiritually. And if that's what you need, that's what you should go for.
And she said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. This is our Father's Day show, 1992. And our topic today is a tale of two dads. I being one dad, and Michael Kruchoski, our producer, being the other. We'll be sharing our experiences of early childhood and our experiences with our fathers and looking at our experiences as fathers today. But as we go into the show, Mike has a few comments to make about some upcoming events.
Well, actually, one of those events is a past event, and viewers may recall that we didn't have any commentary for our Mother's Day show, and that was not meant as a slight to the moms out there or any message, hidden message to women that we don't honor them for their role as the mothers of our children. Actually, what happened is we simply got caught up in events and lost track of how many shows we had, and it was a mistake. So we'd like to, before we talk about Father's Day, honor the moms. And if you have forgotten to honor your mom on Mother's Day, it's never too late. Go ahead and jot a note in a card and say, sorry I missed Mother's Day, and let her know that you care. That's my first message about the past event.
So you're saying to honor mothers of the world.
Mothers of the world.
That's mothers with a big M.
With a big M.
That's right.
Okay, our other announcement is about the Men in Action 1992 celebration of men's lifestyles, which Mike Rivas and I are still working to put together for this coming July 31st, Friday, July 31st, through Sunday, August 2nd in Tejeras Canyon at the Pinon Canyon Camp. And we're excited that Ed Wood, a guest on one of our previous shows, has agreed to come down and join us for that celebration and to lead some activities in the workshops. Now, some viewers may not recall the show with Ed. He taped one that aired back in late November, and he talked about his experiences on the battlefield in World War II. We lifted about 3 minutes of that show to submit to the Hometown USA Video Festival. And we think that that's one of the reasons that we're in the finalists in that competition. So what we'd like to do is share that with you, and as soon as we're ready, we'll go ahead and take a look at that tape.
Earth, the sweet earth in which I would soon hide. And then, oh then, the slam of a sledgehammer hit my flesh and lifted me high, and I whirled up and up and up through a tunnel of green leaves toward the sky, my hands extended as if to grasp those leaves, and the dark brown limbs rushing by me, halting my flight into eternity. My fingers brushed over them, they would not hold. I flew higher into the sky and seemed to merge with the clouds, mixed with their wispy tendrils, not knowing whether to continue this arc toward eternity or fall back to the sweet, sweet earth. With a falling, sliding swoop, I tumbled out of the sky, fell to my knees. I put my fingers to my face, Blood, thick and red and dark, swiftly pumping, covered them. I reached up and touched my head. My helmet was gone. Blood poured from a hole on the left side of my skull. A hard lump protruded from my torn scalp. A piece of shrapnel was embedded in the bone. I looked behind me. My pants were ripped away, my right buttock blown open. Beneath the yellow-white fat, I could see the red raw meat, like the steaks my father once fed me. "Hold still, Wood, hold still," the medic cried, blood from the tip of his wounded nose spraying my face. "Stop wiggling, goddammit. I gotta get this morphine in you." The blood from his own wound sprinkled over me like spittle from a dying breeze. When the shelling stopped, they lifted me into an ambulance parked at the side of the road. My journey into the land of the wounded began in that ambulance, and being moved by it from battalion aid station into World War I bunkers, I smelled the sweet, cloying odor of blood, felt it drip on me from the stretcher above where the man, the soldier within it, died. Here at the front, before there were forms and bureaucrats to describe and fasten to me some categories of wound and pain, I touched men who for a moment cared for me with greater compassion than I had ever experienced at any time or place in my life. Gentleness and compassion, so difficult for the American male to express. Emotions always held there but held back, contained by some impenetrable shell, breaking open now and warming me after I was wounded, as if love could only be given within the frame of violence, and one must be expressed in conjunction with the other. This, the language of war and peace, violence and love, hate and compassion, I have sought to understand on my 40-year journey through the land of the wounded. That's where it started, Mike. I was 19 years old that summer. I was a boy.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. That was Ed Wood, author of On Being Wounded, who will join us at the Pignon Camp Lodge, 31st July, 1st and 2nd of August. I hope you guys might consider coming up and spending some time with us. He's one of a number of guests. Michael, we're celebrating Father's Day today, and we decided to share a little bit about our experiences with our fathers. Our two lives are about as different, obviously looking at us, our two lives and personalities are about as different as American life creates for the 1990s. You want to start off and talk about your dad a little bit?
Yeah. Goodness, my dad is a product of World War II also, probably about as old as Ed Wood is, has a different outlook on things. One of my close friends had him for a class. My dad taught college, and a friend said he has a certain old world charm, meaning he's old-fashioned ideas about a lot of things. But in the men's group that Mike and I participate in weekly, we often talk about our experiences, and I have to say that I'm grateful for my dad. He was there. He was there all the way along. He didn't always understand what I was going through. He didn't. He's authoritarian, a real, laid down the law, but he was there every step along the way. And I once wrote an article for a magazine and wrote just briefly about one of the things that I'll always remember about my dad. When I was having problems with arithmetic in 3rd grade, he made an abacus. That's the Chinese instrument that they use for adding and subtracting. He made an abacus out of popsicle sticks for me, and every night when I came home, he'd grab me and we'd go into the bedroom and we'd do arithmetic. And I guess it was from that early discipline that he tried to instill that I ended up being a math major. I still can't balance my checkbook, but I can certainly do a lot of other things. And that's one of the things I remember about my dad, that he was there. Now, your dad
Well, my dad came back from the Second World War, was a violent drunk, stayed around till I was about 2, and left. I guess the culminating experience was pulled a gun on my mom and I, and at some point actually popped off a few caps, and that was my last contact with him.
Until...
Oh, well, I tried. You know, I started listening to all of this Robert Bly, New Age, heal the wound, go to the workshop, deal with it stuff. And I found out where he was at and gave him a call and reached his home. He wouldn't come to the phone and even talk to me.
How did you feel about that?
Well, oh, God, how did I feel about that? How do I feel about that?
How did you feel about it when it happened?
Well, I'll tell you what, you know, I think one of the problems that men are working with in America right now is a certain amount of numbness. And I have a situation in dealing with my emotions where I'm so armored sometimes that I can be in situations that are emotionally impacting me, and it takes me like 3 days later before I begin to get any feeling, or I don't know what that's about. I don't know if it's just the politics of being male and surviving or what.
Do you think that's related to the fact that when you did try to contact your dad, he just...
Well, no, it hurts a whole bunch. I mean, my whole thing was just basically it was an unsettled wound. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example, and then we'll go back to you. I realized my mom left me with my grandparents and remarried and moved away to the West Indies for a great chunk of my life. And when I was about 6 years old, I realized in the little town that I lived in that I was the only youngster there that didn't have a mom and a dad, traditionally, you know, I remember one night there was a little church social, and everybody kind of gathered up there for a picnic, etc. And all the youngsters were out playing, and I remember that they called everybody to dinner, and I watched all of my playmates run to their family, and suddenly I was standing there, nobody to run to, right? And that's a wound, you know. It's realizing, you know, that you're on the outside. My situation is important, I feel, in my learning to deal with this, because there are a tremendous number of young men in America today who are absolutely abandoned, with no male leadership, no male mentorship, no one to take them into the bedroom with a homemade abacus and do math with them. And so my purpose in calling, basically, was just to say, you know, I've experienced some things as a father myself. I understand that life is not always harmonious. You know, I just like to say thanks for life, and if he wanted to pursue it, fine. If he didn't, fine. But you know, the fact that he wouldn't even come to the phone and say, fuck off, you know. You know, so you know, that's the thing, and that's a wound, and I'm beginning to think that may be some grief that I'm never able to settle. So that's one look at it. How about you?
Well, as you said, our lives are so much different. One of the other things that the men's movement embraces is this stewardship of the earth, and I think that my dad set a good example for me in that respect. For a number of years, he ran what was called the Outdoor Education Program for the Milwaukee Public Schools, and basically what he did was take kids from the city out to the country, and they lived in the woods for a week in one of the camps, traveled over to this island that was essentially wilderness, and taught us outdoor skills, you know, how to row a rowboat, or paddle a canoe, or how to, you know, what things you can eat in the woods and so forth. And that's always stayed with me. That's something that, a lasting, lifelong value that he gave me. It's just that appreciation of the earth. Well, let's talk a little bit about.
That's great. I met your dad. We did a sweat up in the mountains, and you guys came up and spent a little time with us. And he was, I mean, you're obviously a chip off the old block, and you guys came up and had your little hats on, and he had his grandbabies in his arms,
Yep,
and was just an
boys.
empowering, nice guy. It was fun to meet him, and
It was fun to see him.
yeah.
Not always comfortable, but certainly a long way from what you experienced.
Well, you know, one of my comments about that is I run into in male circles of recovery a lot of men whose fathers were around and whose mothers were around and who had homes. And some of them even get checks and support from their parents, and still their parents are like in, you know, their parents are still the boogeymans of their lives, or boogeymen of their lives. They did some things to them that they can never be forgiven for. And I think that one thing that people could be grateful for on Father's Day is having a father who stayed around and who is there and who is breathing and who is capable of working out or allowing the child, who might be our age, son, to work out whatever problems those were, you know, that they experienced as children, as being, which is part of the experience, as opposed to being denied the experience altogether.
I think that that idea of forgiveness, the whole concept of forgiveness is really interesting, and I think that it's particularly relevant today. We have a lot of
Snivellers. We have a lot of snivellers, Mike.
talking about how bad their lives were, and you know, let's face it, our moms and dads grew up in a time that you know, they had problems of their own. They may have had parents that didn't nurture them, and so they didn't learn the skills that were necessary to nurture a lot of people of our generation. But let's forgive them. You know, they're human beings. We all try to learn, and that brings me to the area where you and I are similar. Our experiences as dads. And do you want to tell a little bit about what happened?
Well, I repeated basically some of the same mistakes that my parents made, and ended up getting married at a young age. Well, not really, 21, 22 years old. Had 2 daughters, managed to keep the marriage together for about 10 years. But at that time, I was using a lot of drugs, using a lot of alcohol. My life was pretty much out of control, and managed to do some damage, you know, by not being able to be responsible and be there. Did some damage to my youngsters. Not physically, I didn't beat them or anything, but I think emotionally I deprived them of some of the support and nurturing they should have had. My
situation now
is that my youngest daughter and I are fairly close, and my oldest daughter just chooses not to get in touch with me too much, which is her choice.
And that's a similarity between you and I, that I got married young. I think I was 19 years old, and had a child roughly at age 22. My son, my oldest son, Ben, is coming up on 20 years old now and hasn't spoken to me in 2.5 years. And that hurts. Talk about a wound. That hurts. The fact is that for a long time, I made it very clear that I didn't know everything there was to know. I wasn't perfect. I wanted a close relationship with him, and he chose not to have one. He chose not to have me as a part of his life because he couldn't deal with differences of opinion.
Well, I think that Robert Moore is correct, and the attitude that I have is that, you know, one of the things that I've noticed in being a father in relating to children is that a lot of times things that you say or do that are not big deals to you are absolute life and death to them. And you know, and it's like you never quite are sure when that's happening or when it's not. And I think Robert Moore is right when he says that the primary message that our children should get from us as fathers is that our sons and daughters are our children who we love and whom we are.
They're important.
They're important, and we're well pleased in who they are. And I think that I love my oldest daughter, and I know she loves me. I love my youngest daughter, and I know she loves me a whole bunch. And we spent a lot of time together. I moved up here from El Paso specifically to be with them as they grew up, so that I could be there, knowing what it is like to have no one there. And you know, anybody's bound to make mistakes. So I think she's got every right to work out what she needs to work out. And you know, at certain points the call is hers, but it's not.
Well, at some point, as fathers, there's nothing more that we can do other than to say, we're here, we're willing to talk, and work out any differences. And that's been the message that I've tried to leave for my son, who doesn't acknowledge any of the letters or cards or anything that I send. Simply won't make any effort to heal the wound, to bridge the gap. But I have had an opportunity, another life-saving golden opportunity. I have 2 more sons. So I have a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old.
Aaron the Fierce, yes.
Aaron the Fierce.
I've met him.
It's a real joy, even when they're cranky as all get out. We manage to sit down, find a calm spot to sit down and talk things out. And my older son, the middle son I should say, Paul, who's 4 years old, will scream and yell and kick and pinch and cry, and I hold him, tell him that he's really important to me. I tell him that he's making me real upset and making my stomach hurt. Would he please go someplace and sit down and finish crying, and then we can go ahead and work out our problems. Sometimes he comes to me and he says, I can't calm down, please help me. And we go out, we may walk outside, take a look at the moon at night, do some breathing exercises. I said, here's what some people do. They do breathing exercises to calm down. Let's try some. And I don't think I would be nearly as attentive a father if I hadn't had the experience, this rift with my older son. I certainly appreciate my younger sons a lot more.
Billy Scott was Billy Scott. Billy's name. I was trying to get it out there, and I wasn't sure you were through speaking. Billy Scott is a young fellow from out in eastern New Mexico who came on the program looking for his dad, and he hadn't seen him for quite some time.
7 years now, I think.
Right. There is a wounding in America, and that wound has to be grieved. We have to accept that the absence of fathers in thousands and thousands of homes, men and women are not androgynous. They are different beings, and there should be a celebration of that. And I think the child should have access to both sexes, to both parents. Mm-hmm. And obviously one of the ways that we're going to have to start picking that up is where men who cannot reach their children for whatever reason, or whatever has been decreed by the courts, or whatever emotional hysteria the two adults have created to destroy that, have to overlook that and begin to learn how to reach out and mentor other young men and women. You know, we talk about sons a lot in men's groups. But the reality is it's very important for young women growing up to know kind, loving, gentle, understanding, strong men who they can put faith and trust in without fear of being abused or physically violated or beaten or otherwise manipulated.
Or pushed into stereotypical roles, for that matter.
Right. So, you know, it's real important. And I looked... I think the men's movement is really struggling to do that. You know, one of the things that you and I have been talking about, and then I'll let you talk a little bit because I know you want to, is that and one of the reasons we're trying to do this little thing in the mountains is there is a a battalion of sages and wise men proselytizing recovery for men. And there are 4 libraries full of books on men's recovery. And we've done that primarily in the last 5 years. I mean, the work's been going on for 10. We have more stuff than we could possibly digest in a year's time. So the next 10 years is an opportunity for men to really begin to do some things differently. And it is down to what the individual male experiences and the changes that he can make as who he is.
Taking what he learns about himself, turning it back to his family. That's the second aspect that we'll explore up in Tijeras. And then finally, contributing to society. And
Certainly.
I think you made a good point that there are a lot of dads out there who don't have contact with their kids for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's not of their doing, but there is something that those men can do. They can go out and find something that's worth doing for other young kids. Being a big brother for some boys, working with community groups to create a playground or some sort of program, summer program for kids. There are a lot of ways that men can still get that contact and contribute to the young people of our nation. Well, this is Father's Day weekend, and if you haven't made an attempt to talk to your dad and tell him that you care about him, why don't you try doing that? If you have some sort of rift with him, I'd urge you to think about the concept of forgiveness. Without forgiveness, we would eventually not talk to anybody in the world, because at one time or another, somebody's sure to offend us or hurt us, and if we can't learn to forgive, we simply won't have anybody to talk to after a while.
It's time for healing in America. It's time for us to, whatever damage is done, it's time to do things differently. And it's time for each of us to try as best we can, not as emotional giants, but as people. And life is the gift that we have, and it's time for us to begin to do some things with that, not look to other people to experience, but experience it ourselves. It's not psychobabble, it's a reality that we're dealing with. Any quick final comment?
Nope. I thank the viewers for watching tonight.
Well, we would like to thank the viewers who watch Speaking of Men on a regular basis and let us know that. We would also like to remind you to tune in again, and that the child is father to the man. Good night. Bye-bye. Well, that was a quick 25.